All right, so in this module, we're going to look at how we can use Realm to persist our data instead of using core data. If you have never come across Realm, then it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with it by going to realm.io. And they've got a whole bunch of educational resources, as well as tutorials, example apps, and also really, really good documentation. So what we're going to be using is their Realm database, which is an alternative to SQLite and Core Data. And it's also open source, which is great because if you wanted to dig in and look at how they implemented their core, then you can do that. So we're going to head over to Products, Realm Database, and we're going to pick our language as Swift, and this takes us to the Swift documentation. So if you wanted to look at the source code, then you can go to Realm Swift and you can dig through all of these files, but I'm going to show you how to get started. So in order to install Realm, there's three ways. You can either download the framework or use CocoaPods or use Carthage. And I, as always, favor CocoaPods. Look at how short it is compared to everything else. And so this is what we're going to be using. So let's head over to our project. We're going to close it. We're going to open up Terminal. And we're going to locate our Tadooey folder, so the one that, of course, contains the Tadooey.xcode project. And then we're going to cd to it. And if you're interested in speeding up your workflow, you can actually chain commands in the terminal together by just using a semicolon. So we're going to change directory to the Tadooey folder. And then we're going to perform pod init at that location. And then we're going to say open pod file in the application called Xcode, and we're going to hit enter. And now it should go through and perform all of those things, bringing us to our pod file. So now I'm going to uncomment this line so that we're targeting platform iOS 9.0 and above. And we are going to use frameworks. And the pods that we're going to incorporate is one called Pod Realm Swift. And this has dependencies to also pull in the Realm framework as well. So we're going to hit save, close that down, and go back in here and say pod install. All right, so after a little bit of waiting, you can see it's now done. And it's installed the latest versions of Realm and Realm Swift by just simply saying pod Realm Swift. Now, currently, the latest version of Realm Swift is 3.0.2, and that is the version that we're pulling in through CocoaPods as well. So just check and confirm, and then we can close down Terminal, and we're going to go back into Finder and open up our Xcode workspace file. All right, so here's our brand new Xcode project with those pods incorporated. And let's just expand all of our folders so that we can see it clearly. And as you can see, as soon as we install Realm, we've got this warning in our status bar here, and it says that your pods, including the Realm and Realm Swift, need to be updated to recommended settings. This is not a problem though, because if we just click on this warning, then it will update all of these things automatically for us. We're going to hit perform changes and it's all good to go. And that's it. All right, cool. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go over to our app delegate and we're going to try and create a brand new data entry in our Realm database. So inside here, the first thing that we need to do is we're going to have to import Realm Swift. And as always, usually with CocoaPods, it might not recognize your modules when you first open up your Xcode workspace. So if it does this and you can see for sure that there it is, then you can simply go and hit Command B to build, and it should get rid of that error for you once build completes. Now we're going to write our code inside the application did finish launching with options delegate method, and here we're going to first create our brand new realm. So you can imagine realms as almost like different persistent containers, and we're going to call it realm. So let realm equals a new object from the realm class. Now, that would be great if that just worked as is, but unfortunately, the initialization of a new realm is actually marked with throw. So it can, in fact, throw an error. So we have to mark it with a try, which means that we probably need a do catch block. So now that's a little bit safer. We're going to use it to save a new piece of data. So Realm allows us to use object-oriented programming and persist objects. So let's go ahead and create a new Swift file, and let's call it just data. And it's going to be grouped inside the data model folder. And inside data, we're going to be using Realm. So I'm going to import Realm Swift, and then I'm going to create a new class. The class is, of course, going to be called data, and it's going to subclass something called object. And object is a class that's used to define Realm model objects. So it's a superclass that we're going to use to enable us to persist our data class. And the code inside is going to be where we're going to declare our properties for the data class. So say if the data that we needed was a variable called name, and it was of type string, and it starts off with a value of an empty string, and another one called age, and it's of type int, and it starts off being 0. So under any normal conditions, if we weren't subclassing object and we were just creating a new class to represent our data, then this would be fine. However, because we're using Realm, we actually need to mark our variables with the keyword dynamic. And there's a long and short answer as to what dynamic means. So the complex answer is that dynamic is what's called a declaration modifier. It basically tells the runtime to use dynamic dispatch over the standard, which is a static dispatch. And this basically allows this property name to be monitored for change at runtime, i.e. while your app is running. So that means if the user changes the value of name, for example, while the app is running, then that allows Realm to dynamically update those changes in the database. But dynamic dispatch is something that actually comes from the Objective-C APIs. So that means that we have to mark dynamic with @Objective-C to be explicit that we are using the Objective-C runtime. Now, the simple answer as to why we just added these two keywords in there is that we need to add these two modifiers basically so that Realm can monitor for changes in the value of this property. And this is what will allow us to do it while the app is running. So let's go ahead and add that to our second variable as well. So they are now both compliant with how Realm properties should be declared. So whenever you're declaring a new property that's any of the basic data types, you will need these two keywords in front of it. Okay, so now we can go into our app delegate and we can create a new piece of data that is going to be an object of the data class, and we can set its properties by saying data.name equals Angela, data.age equals, I'm not going to say my real age here, right? Let's say I'm 12. All right, so let's go ahead and add our new item, i.e. create in CRUD, and we're going to commit the current state of our Realm. So just as we did with core data, we basically created a new piece of data, then we used the context to commit the current state to our persistent container, or in this case, it's our Realm database. So in order to do that, we can move this down here. And after we've created this brand new Realm, we can then say realm.write, which means commit the current state persistent storage or to our Realm database. And then we can say realm.add, a new object. And the new object is going to be our data. So as with initializing a new Realm, realm.write can also throw. So we have to also mark it with the try keyword, which is why they're both kept inside this do block underneath where we created our data. So now all we have to do is run our app so that our application did finish launching gets called and all of this gets implemented so that we'll be able to save our data to our Realm database. All right, so that worked without any issue. But how do we view our data? Because we're not using it to populate any of our table views. This is still using core data, remember? And all of our code is inside the app delegate. But if we have a look in our debug log, we didn't get any errors coming back, right? So that means our process probably completed successfully. So our data did get saved into our Realm. So in order to locate where our data is stored or where our Realm database is, we can use a print statement. We can say print realm.configuration default configuration file URL. And this is the location of the Realm file. And now, if we print that out, we'll be able to locate where our Realm database exists. Now, because we're not unwrapping it, it's going to get printed as an optional. And there it is. So that's our file location. But before we can view this file, you can see that the file is actually something called default.realm. So it's a Realm file. So in order to see the data that exists inside, we need to download a piece of software from the App Store. And it's a free Mac app called the Realm Browser. So if you search for Realm Browser inside your App Store, then you'll come across this Mac app made by the Realm team. And it's free to download, and it's quite a small piece of software. Only 5.9 megabytes, and you can simply download it onto your local machine. But once you have done so, then you can open up your Realm browser and you can click on the Open Realm file. So now it's going to take you into your file browser, and we're going to have to navigate to that location that we printed out earlier on. Now, previously, I've always shown you the sort of bog standard way of navigating to a location in your file directory, which is chasing the directories, right? But it's a little bit painful. So let me show you how you would do it as a shortcut. So if you hit Command-Shift-G, then you can actually go straight to the folder or the document. And all you have to do is take this string that says file something and all the way down to Realm without copying any of the round brackets. Hit Command-C to copy, and then we're going to hit Command-V to paste. Now, if you navigate to the front of this string, if you delete the file : / so you only end up with a /user/Angela Yu. This is your file path that will help the Finder to navigate to this location. And you can go ahead and simply hit go. And it takes you straight to that location. Now, you might think I'm a little bit sadistic for making you guys go through this process many times previously. But it's always good to know how it's done manually before you learn about shortcuts, because a lot of people learn the shortcuts first, and then when you get stuck or when something doesn't work, then it's always very confusing. So there's always the long path to fall back on, but to save your sanity and your precious life, then it's a good idea to use the file path to navigate. And you can do this in any Finder, not just in the Realm browser, by the way. So if you're inside any sort of Finder window and you're trying to locate something, you can simply hit Command-Shift-G and you can go straight to that location. Now that we're here inside the Realm browser, we can simply select our default.realm database and we can hit open. And Realm will need access to this path, so we're going to have to click allow, and you might even have to enter a password every now and then. So we ran our app twice, first time to check that it worked, and the second time to get this file path. And that means that our application to finish launching with options got called twice, which means that we saved 2 pieces of data, both with name Angela and age 12. And you can see that the Realm browser is this really, really simple interface where you can see your models, so our data model, and you can see your properties: name, which is a string, age, which is an integer, and we've got our pieces of data. And it even shows you the minimum, average, maximum, the sum, and some simple bits of analysis on your data. So that was pretty pain-free, right? And compared to how much work we needed to do in order to set up our data model using Core Data, I hope you can see that this is a very, very useful tool. And we're going to dive deeper into Realm in the next lesson so that we can start working on how to do CRUD using Realm instead of Core Data. And you're going to see all of the ease and the shortness of the code and all of the beauty of this new way of doing things. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson.